Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move now into our first tri-talk of this Trilogue Conference of 2026, and speaking to the question of inclusion and the business case for vision. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Hein Wagner, who is a motivational speaker and founder of the Hein Wagner Academy. This is a nonprofit that is dedicated to enabling the visually impaired to become economically independent and socially connected. And they do this through education, training, sports, recreation, and the arts. Hein has been dubbed the blind man with vision. And yet he has never allowed his disability to prevent him from achieving any of his goals. He's run the Antarctica Marathon. He's sailed the Cape to Rio yacht race. He's set the world blind land speed record, and he's done that twice. And he's completed the Ironman Challenge. He is also the global and local ambassador for several social upliftment and environmental causes. I'm going to ask us, out of respect, to really give Hein a massive round of applause as he comes up to address us. Thank you.
Podium right in front of you. You've got the mic.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Nazi. I got to be honest. I have never, ever seen so many good-looking people together in one room. Yeah, you look amazing. Especially those latecomers at the back, you know. Welcome. So I get asked, Hein, how does a blind skydiver know when he's close to the ground? Ladies and gentlemen, it's quite simple and easy because you can feel the slack on your guide dog's leash, you know. Anybody can sponsor me a Jack Russell for next year's trials? Just kidding. I was born blind, but I've never, ever allowed that to stand in my way of living a full and adventurous life. And as I was rehearsing that very line at home for a virtual keynote, my daughter, who's 9 years old, chirped me and said, "Sure, Papa, but you keep walking into things all the time." They get very clever, very young. So I was born blind, but I do not know when I found out that I'm blind. I was probably 6 or 7 years old when society pointed it out to me. Before that, I was just living this life at home in a normal home, and I could choose what absolutely everything looked like. And I chose already then to see the beauty in it. And when I discovered that I'm blind, and when society pointed it out to me, the only thing I wanted to do, I wanted to be like all of you. I just wanted to be sighted. And what did I want to see? I wanted to see absolutely everything there is to be seen in this world. And given the opportunity today to see for just a split second, what do you think would I choose? Of course, I would choose to make eye contact with that same little 10-year-old of mine, that little daughter that keeps chirping me when I'm prepping for a virtual keynote. What I want to do today is I want to share with you 2 universal laws that have generated more light into my life than sight can ever begin to do. And it also helped me to conquer the one thing the sighted fear most: darkness. So I was born with a condition called Leber's congenital amaurosis. And at the age of 5, I experienced my single most traumatic experience. My parents sent me off to the Worcester School for the Blind, Pioneer School, dropped me off in a place of unknown total darkness. I was so lost I couldn't find my way to my bedroom. Some days in boarding house, I couldn't find my way to the bathroom in time, but at least I've got an excuse. I can't see where it is, so it helps a little bit. I also soon realized that all these blind kids are walking up and down the passage, clicking their tongues, making funny noises. I phoned my mum. I said, "Ma, is this a school for blind children or mull children? Why are they clicking their tongues?" Soon I realized if I don't click my tongue while I was walking down the passage, all these blind buggers kept walking into me. So of course I started making a noise. The only thing I wanted to do in blind school was go back home. Go back to my normal life with my sighted friends, the kids whom I knew since I was in my diapers. And I had to wait 5 long weeks before that first weekend and my parents can pick me up because the teachers told them, you cannot remove this kid after 2 weeks, at least 5, he's not going to adapt. So I got into the car, super excited, jumped out in front of our house, and I was about to join my sighted friends, the kids whom I knew since I was in my diapers. And I got completely, totally rejected by that little playgroup. And as I stood there, I'm thinking, but why? Why? Nothing has changed. I was blind when I left 5 weeks ago. And I realized that for me to be reintegrated into this tiny little group, I have to do or mimic what they're doing. And all of a sudden, they got bicycles. They're on their bicycles cycling up and down the road. And I'm thinking to myself, they will accept me back in if I can show them that I can ride a bicycle. Now, blind children, 5-year-old blind kids do not own bicycles. Unless your parents are fairly sadistic. You're not going to own a bike as a blind 5-year-old. My brother owned a bike. I took it out the garage. I pushed it up and down the driveway. 2 hours later, the tears are running down my face as I realized this is impossible. And I was about to throw that stupid bicycle as hard and as far as 2 5-year-old arms can possibly throw a bike, when a tiny voice in the back of my head said, take 4 more steps. Within those 4 paces, I could hear the reflection from the bicycle's chain bouncing against the pavement, dancing back into my ears. And I realized I can use that tiny noise to cycle in a straight line. 2 weeks later, I was going up and down the driveway. 3 weeks later, going up and down the street. 2 months later, I challenged all these sighted kids and said, come on, guys, do you want to dice me? I promise I'll keep my eyes closed. I won't cheat. So back at school, we had physiology, not biology. It took me a while to work this out. The teachers told me, Hein, the only reason for this is we couldn't find a strong enough microscope for the blind guys, so that's why we're doing physiology. Now, sitting in the back of the physiology class, the teacher is discussing the functionality of the eye. Chapter 14. There's 15 blind kids sitting in front of her. I'm thinking, where do they find all these sadists? Who cares about the iris? Who cares about the eye? But some things he said in that classroom that morning brought up a question in my mind. And that question was, how many kids are born with my eye disease, LCA? And I thought, whoa, what a neat idea. So I sneaked out the classroom, made my way to the library to go do some research. By the way, our physiology teacher was also blind. She never saw me leaving. It was incredible having blind teachers who could easily pull the wool over their eyes. 15 of us in the classroom, 10 would sneak out for a cigarette, and a 5 that stays behind and goes, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. I dusted off a number of Braille books because, believe me, if you try and read a Braille book under the dust, it becomes an incredibly long story. You never get to the real point. But that morning, I discovered that just one out of 80,000 kids are born with LCA. I had a choice that day. I could either see this as the most negative thing that I've ever discovered, or I could own it, embrace it with everything I have in my being. So hang on high, and the fact that you're different to 80,000 kids is the most unique, the most special, and the most positive thing you've ever discovered. Let me be brutally honest with you, the single most difficult decision I've made to date. But the one thing that I've learned in life, my friend, if you make a decision based on your gut feeling, that feeling from deep within, do yourself a favor. Stick to that decision, because it might just be the best one you've ever made. Thank you. So I finished my school, my matric in Worcester. I moved back to Cape Town. I enrolled for every single computer training course which any institution would allow me to enroll for. But at school, I realized that the bridge that I have to cross into this world that wasn't designed for me is held up by 2 pillars: education and technology. And I fell in love with tech. And I decided that I'm going to make a career in IT, no matter what it takes. So there I was, enrolling in various courses, doing this programming course, doing that computer networking course, CV looking good. All my sighted friends has landed the jobs, gone to university, they're all working. I'm still living at home. Sending out another CV, another one, not a response, not a letter of regret. One morning in my bed, sitting up a few years down the line, I realized, but Hein, what's going to happen to you for the rest of your life? And as I sat in my bed that morning, I realized there's a huge mistake on my CV. It's only 3 words. It reads, blind since birth. So you know what I did? I deleted it. I'm done. Gat vol. No more. Remove those 3 words from that piece of paper. Send it out again within 5 days. 4 interviews lined up in the CBD of Cape Town. And I felt quite chuffed about it because though none of those people knew it was a blind dude on his way to the interview. I soon had to replace those words. It didn't work so well. However, I did land a job in IT. I moved on to work for MWeb in a tech environment, eventually working for Mark Shuttleworth's company in internet security back in the day. And I guess the pinnacle of my IT career was being appointed as brand ambassador for the global IT company SAP out of Germany, helping multinationals to deploy ERPs through change management within their organization. Because anything you believe is impossible is not true. The last 20 years, I've had the privilege of traveling the world, speaking to audiences around the globe, 5, 10, 15, 20, 15,000 at a time. Doing what? Inspiring people to turn huge obstacles into major opportunities, because that's exactly what I did with my blindness. And on this journey, I was in Mumbai, India. And after my talk that morning, the host said to me, Hein, on the cusp of one of the biggest slums here in Mumbai is a tiny little school, 22 million people living in the slum. There's a tiny school with 40 kids. I'm like, but that's not a solution to education. He said, no, Hein, these 40 kids at this school happens to be deaf and blind. I just want you to contemplate for a moment implications of not being able to see and at the same time not being able to hear. I remember at school we had a few deaf-blind kids. I didn't pay it much attention. But there I was, arriving at the school, meeting one of their teachers. He's been at the school for 55 years. He's completely deaf and blind. He's been there since an 8-year-old. He went on to achieve a master's degree in education, and he's educating fellow deaf-blind children at the same school. The man sits in front of absolutely, what a giant. He sits in front of an ordinary-looking computer with a huge screen in front of him for your benefit that you can look over his shoulder whilst he's typing on a normal touch-type keyboard. Below his fingers and his keyboard, a tiny braille display that projects in real time. So for me and him to communicate, we simply swap hands. Now, given the opportunity to type on this giant of a man's keyboard, with his master's degree in education being completely deaf and blind, what do you guess was my question to him? Sir, in capital letters, how on earth did you achieve a master's degree in education? We swapping hands. He start typing. I touch the braille display. He says, humble reply. You must understand, Hein, that a deaf-blind person's world begins and ends as far as his or her fingers can reach. And within that, we have to educate. I'm swapping hands with him. I go, but how do you do this? Well, we developed the tactile sign language where the kids physically hold hands by moving their fingers and writing in one another's palms. They can understand one another. They can communicate. And Hein, by the way, would you mind talking to the kids for 10 minutes? I'm like, they can't hear me. He said, but that's not a problem. We sorted that out. The first person can hear. They're sitting in a circle, 40 of them holding hands. The first one can hear me, relating the story to number 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. 4 to 5, 6 to 7, 9 to 10. Takes about 13 and a half minutes for the last guy to catch the joke, but he who laughs the last laughs the longest, even at the deaf-blind school in Mumbai. And that brings me, ladies, thank you. That brings me to the first universal law that I want to leave with you. And that, my friend, I always get asked, Hein, if you had a choice, I never had one. But if you had a choice, would you want to be deaf or would you want to be blind? I can truly, honestly not answer you, but I can tell you this. The one thing that I do know is I do not want to be both, deaf and blind. And my friend, the law that I want to leave with you is the law of appreciation. Appreciate what you've got, because I promise you there are hundreds, thousands, in fact, Millions of people out there are less fortunate than we are. And remember, the things that me and you, the things we take for granted, someone else right now is praying for. So yes, I have done a few adventures. I've climbed mountains, done Ironman, raced fast cars, do all sorts of crazy stuff. But my single biggest achievement to date is unconditionally accepting my blindness. Because what it did, it moved me from being blind to being blinded by possibility. And thank you. And a few years ago, I had the opportunity, because technology plays such a huge role in my life, in my daily life, I had the opportunity among a few other dear friends who's now become colleagues to start an academy for the blind called the Hein Wagner Academy back in Worcester, here in South Africa. What do? Among other things, we train blind people to become cyber security analysts. And this is impossible if it wasn't for the CSI partnerships. Now you might go, cyber security analysts. Our academy is it is in fact the only academy in the world that offers cybersecurity for the blind on the level that we do. And the success of our partnership with Prime Media and APSA is on many levels. But not only did APSA and Prime Media say, yes, we'll get involved from a CSI perspective, but we go one step further. We will, of course, employ your candidates on merit. So last year, when the first cohort finished in cybersecurity, APSA Bank had the highest percentage of cybersecurity analysts in the cybersecurity SOC in the world who happens to be blind. We also, as part of this, I just want to find the podium, there we go. As part of the conference, we are on the first floor, we've got to stand ourselves, Prime Media and APSA and the Academy. So please find the steps, find the lift, come upstairs, come say hello to us. We are launching a little booklet, Inclusive Employment in Practice. So this little booklet is specifically designed to help you as employer. It's written from the blind person's perspective, from the employee's perspective, and a lot of very helpful ideas, concepts. You could literally read it in a couple of, I would say, half an hour. You could be through it. There it is. So please come around and grab yourselves a copy to help you, to assist you, to facilitate the employment of the visually impaired. Because if you give a little bit of what you've got, you will get more than you can ever imagine. Even if it's just a little bit of your most valuable asset, your time. Now, speaking of which, Nos is going to start flashing me cards soon. I think my 15 minutes are almost out. But I just want to take you back to my second most traumatic experience. Standing in a driveway in front of my house after 5 weeks in blind school, where literally every night cried myself to sleep as a 5-year-old because I just wanted to go back to my sighted world. And the only thing that stopped the tears in that bed was that I believed in my 5-year-old mind that this school that my parents dropped me off at, they're going to teach me how to see. Of course, they didn't manage that, but they gave me a lot of tools to help me to navigate the unknown. And standing in that driveway, being completely rejected by that group of sighted kids, you know, how much of that was in my head, I don't know. How much was true, I don't know. But 47 years later, I can still remember how it made me feel. And I was walking that bike up and down the driveway, and I turned to throw it away and walk away from it. And if I did throw it down, my life would have probably turned out differently. But you know what? I took those 4 steps. I urge you to take your 4. Think about the things I had to deal with staying safe in that bicycle saddle, oncoming cars, parked cars, pedestrians, lampposts, trees, you name them. We had these 2 huge flower pots on either side of our driveway, and I could hear them when cycling past them because the clickety-click noise, the frequency went up. I could fly between them, stop 10 centimeters in front of the garage door, look at me. I can do what you can do. And for me to stay safe in that bicycle saddle, I only use 4 senses. I dare you to just try and use all 5 yours on a daily basis. We all have challenges. Mine some days a little darker than yours, and I do not know the answers. But I can tell you this. The day that I started looking at my obstacle, blindness, from a slightly different perspective, it became the greatest opportunity that I could ever dream for. Because if you change the way you look at things, I guarantee you that the things you look at will change. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. I am blind. Exactly what is your excuse? I thank you.
I'm here. And Hein, that was a standing ovation.
Oh, thank you. I thought I saw it out of the corner of my eye then, I wasn't quite sure.
If you're not moved in this moment, I don't know. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. Thank you so much for the gift of you and the gift of what you've shared with us this morning. We don't have a lot of time together, but I thought we might use this opportunity just to maybe double click on a few things. You describe founding the Academy as potentially the most rewarding thing that you've ever done. And I think about that in the context of the fact that you've also achieved so many physical feats, but you've also built an institution. Now, I'm keen to understand what's the most difficult thing about building an institution, because it's within institutions where lasting change becomes possible. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, it is, I just want to start with the rewarding part.
Sure.
Because I want you to just visualize this. You are blind. You are walking in a township with a white cane, which you could barely afford. Try and do just finding your way in a township, being sighted, or add the complexity of being blind. That individual, somehow, through radio communications, through a partnership in CSI Comms and Prime Media, finds out, because radio is still the blind man's best friend, science guide dogs and a few other things, and technology, that there's an opportunity that you could go study in various courses at an academy back in Cape Town or in Worcester. Go through the education, and you end up working for a corporate in South Africa. Nothing, you know, looking in on that and playing a small part in making that happen, because I've got a phenomenal team on the ground who's actually doing this. And without the support of corporate South Africa, CSI initiative, this would not be possible. But knowing that that individual has not only broken his own cycle of poverty, in the end, he's broken the cycle of poverty for his entire family. So it's a challenge out there, because you're just convincing people that blind people can work a computer, the basic things. It takes time, and that's why we feel, and that's why I'm so chuffed about this partnership with the book that we put on the table and say, hey, we've walked that way. We can guide you. We can show you how to navigate the unknown.
Sure. And you're taking us into a reality that I think many people in this room can connect with, the idea of being a young boy, young girl in a township, trying to navigate the password that gets you out of those conditions of poverty. And so thank you for making that real. I want you to take us back to the moment where you talk about going into these many interviews. Because the next question for me is that while we might see a lot of companies that invest in disability-focused programs, we also find in the same breath their boardrooms, their senior teams, their supplier networks largely remain inaccessible to people with disabilities. In your experience, what is the disconnect between corporate intent and meaningful inclusion? And if you could suggest one structural change that companies can make, what would that be?
Sure. So I find that the successes I either personally had or through the academy is when the CFO or the CIO or the CEO or the chairman of the board of a national or multinational organization He's got direct access to a family member with a disability, whether that be blind or whatever. The door is already almost wide open. Now, that doesn't have to be the case, but when you are an advocate, and I've devoted most of my life's work to promote the abilities of the blind, I go for the low-hanging fruit, because I'm not going to try and break down the door where there's zero entry.
Sure.
But if I know that there's a link, it's easier. But what happens is when one organization does this successfully, it starts to mushroom. Our biggest challenge in the academy is not, we would love to work with as many corporates as we can, of course. But the only thing is, when do we start really seriously market that we don't disappoint the people on the other side that we can't help? You can only help so many, and we're going to strive to do more. But what we've also done to answer the rest of your question is, we will soon be rolling out accessibility products where we can help you as an organization to make sure that your application, your conference app, your banking app, you're tested by our students, by the blind, help you to make those applications, your web interface accessible. Why am I mentioning it? Because that, in many cases, is the entry point for the blind person who wants to apply for a job at your organization. But if your website is not even compatible or accessible, how is he or she going to get through the door? So that's another service, a layer of service that we add to the academy services to help corporates to make sure that the environment, the technical side of it, at least, is accessible.
Yeah. So, Hein, what I'm hearing you say is that perhaps there is a personal challenge for us to think about where are the doors of our organization, whether the door being the website being, or whether the door be the way we build our supplier network, or the way we think about our hiring processes. But the idea that the door becomes a proxy for the invitation to be a lot more inclusive. And I love the fact that you use the website as an example.
It was 97% of the blind in this country still being unemployed. We've got a lot to do. Can you imagine if that was true for any other demographic?
Yeah. It's a sobering thought. I've got a final one before we wrap out our conversation. I want to bring the theme of the conference back into the conversation: voices, values, vision. You've spoken about what it means to have vision without sight in this moment and other moments. But now you also have an opportunity to speak directly to organizations in the room who have resources, who have relationships, who have influence. If there's one thing that you would want them to see, what would that be?
I think that what most organizations easily can do is just take the risk on the blind, because it's not that big. It's extremely, extremely rewarding. Technology, to give you an idea, for 53 years of my life, or almost, I've always been fascinated by visual arts, and it has always been inaccessible to me. But now, just simply using my phone, I can take a picture, use AI, it describes the painting to me, or anything for that matter, better than the sighted world can do. Now, if AI, for example, can open my eyes to possibility, to see things, I don't think the sighted, you have any excuse to just look slightly different through your lens. And it's worth taking the risk on the blind. We deserve it.
Oh, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Hein Wagner. Thank you so much, Hein.